From WAMU 88 at American University in Washington, welcome to the Politics Hour starring Tom Sherwood. I'm Kojo Nandi. Tom Sherwood is our resident analyst. He's a reporter at NBC4 and a columnist for the current newspapers. Welcome, Tom.
Good afternoon. Great weekend coming up.
Good afternoon to you. Why is it a great weekend coming?
Well, A, I'm not working, and B, I'll be out. I'm being over at Chesapeake Bay on Sunday.
I thought you were going to say something about the weather, something about sporting events taking place.
I've given up
a great
on
weekend
sports
because I'm not working.
I wish it were Lynn and I were Catholic. I would give up sports, professional sports in Washington.
I hear you. I feel the same way. Also joining us in studio is Richard Maddalena. He is a Maryland state senator representing the 18th district in Montgomery County. Senator Maddalena, welcome.
Thank you very much, Kojo. Great to see you.
If you have comments or questions for Richard Maddalena, call us now. Start calling at 800-433-8850 or send email to kojo@wamu.org. You can shoot us a tweet at Kojo Show. Tom Sherwood, former Virginia Governor Robert McDonnell, is trying to get a federal appeals court to overturn his convictions, but at the hearing that was held this week, it didn't seem to go too well for him. The Post is reporting that at least two of those federal judges were asking the kind of questions that made them appear very skeptical about whether the claims that the defense of former Governor McDonnell is making are valid claims at all. So it doesn't look good for him right now.
Well, I think the first thing you have to say, every lawyer will say this, and I'm certainly not a lawyer, but every lawyer will say.
Every week you say things that lawyers would say.
I've listened to them long enough. I could become one. Maybe I'll take the bar exam. You cannot go by the demeanor or the length of questions or the style of questions from judges. In some cases, a lawyer was telling me just yesterday, if one of these judges, there are three-judge panel, if a judge comes at you very hard, questioning everything about it may just be that he or she is trying to resolve in his or her own mind how they see the case themselves, and they're looking to flesh it all out. It doesn't mean they're against you. So a lot of lawyers I do talk to think that the governor's case is fairly weak in terms of an appeal, but then on the other hand, all these attorneys general and other people have written friends of the court kind of letters saying that McDonnell did not do anything demonstrably wrong and he should not have been convicted. So I think it's a big open question whether this is going to be overturned. If I were going to bet, based on everything I've been told, I'd bet he's not going to win.
Rich Maddalena, you think that Tom Sherwood, because he's been covering courts and everything else for a very long time, a very, very, very long time, you think he's right saying that you can't judge by the questions that judges ask?
I think he is. I had a chance to sit through the Supreme Court arguments on the marriage case a few weeks ago, and I think when Justice Kennedy jumped in with a lot of questions that had a lot of people nervous, but in all the reviews, it had me nervous. And all the reviews afterwards I read, it was about that you can't at all judge by the questions or the approach that the different judges have when they're asking questions because they're not tipping their hand.
I should have one qualifier on this. My good longtime friend Nancy Lewis, who used to cover the courts, the federal courts for the Washington Post, now retired, told me Sherwood, stay away from the courts. You cannot. I would get the Superior Court and the Court of Appeals and the District Court, all those courts mixed up, and I'd have to call her. Now, which court is this? And so I'm not going to do any more talking about the courts.
Okay, then let's turn to politics.
Oh, I was going to say we need to ask Tom Sherwood to stay away from sports because he just told me that he wrote an article about how great it was to be a Washington area sports fan that came out Wednesday.
It came out Wednesday.
Everything is collapsing. Exactly. Everything's gone downhill. I usually blame everything on Tom Boswell whenever he writes a column. That's usually the kiss of death. But now I know it's also Tom.
You need to blame it on somebody. Of course, the Wizards play Game 6 tonight.
And it could be weeks and weeks before we know what's happening to Bob McDonnell and his wife, and they're out on they're out of jail until it happens.
Well, let's move on to politics in the District of Columbia before we go out to Maryland with Senator Maddalena. Mayor Muriel Bowser had two allies sworn in on the D.C. Council today, Brandon Todd in Ward 4, LaRuby May from Ward 8. This coming at a time, however, when she reversed her position on two issues before the council, One of them proposed cuts to the University of the District of Columbia. She had proposed cutting 3.5 million from the budget. She said, or about 3 million from the budget, I think it was. She said, no, it can stay in the budget right now because there were several members of the council who opposed it. She also backed off her argument for exemption from the Freedom of Information Act requests for the footage from body cameras that will be rolling out for the police. Ward 5 council member Kenyon McDuffie had said that he was opposed to that and it wasn't going to get by his committee. So on the one hand, she's got new allies on the council. On the other hand, she's backing up on some issues. Do you think that's not going to happen in the future now that you got more
I think you and
friendly council members?
Maddalena would understand this, being in the finance position there in Maryland. This is a nearly $13 billion budget. We're talking about $1 million here and $1 million there. It's real money, but it's in the terms of the budget. I mean, the mayor will probably come away with 99% of what she wants in the budget. But the issue here is she's trying to show some flexibility. She's a new mayor. The UDC, we're talking just a few million, $3.5 million. On the cameras, the big controversy about the cameras is not paying for them, but whether or not the results of the cameras will be subject to the Freedom of Information Act, or whether it will just simply be available like it is in
Don't have to ask.
Journalists. I want to be able to see all that America has to offer.
Exactly.
Which is what John Wilson once said about pornography. That should be on cable or not. So she's showing some flexibility, which is smart for a mayor. But also, you know, these are preliminary actions of all the various committees, and then there will be a final bringing together the whole budget in about a month, and then she'll have their 2 new members, and I think she'll mostly get her way on most things.
Yes, well, Richard
And
Maddalena.
that's right. I mean, the governors tend to get their way on most things. They have a few fights.
Well, the executive, I think in probably all 3 jurisdictions, the executive has a strong hand to play in the way that both or all 3, DC, Maryland, and Virginia are set up.
Boy, and has he been playing that hand in Maryland. Earlier this week, he made an announcement about money earmarked for schools. And I get the impression that a lot of people in the General Assembly, especially in places like Prince George's and Montgomery County, were not particularly pleased with the money earmarked for schools. Tell us about that.
Well, the governor led off with his budget proposal in January with what I would describe as some pretty significant reductions in public education. He tried to cut the general funding formula, and he also cut a additional funding formula that does provide money to jurisdictions where the cost of doing business is higher. And no surprise that Montgomery and Prince George's counties are the biggest beneficiaries of those funds. Now, interestingly, the governor seems to be more interested in the geography of the last election than necessarily in, I believe, smart public policy. He's making decisions over and over that seem to penalize jurisdictions that did not vote for him in the last election. Of the,
there were only 3, I think, that
there were
didn't vote
4.
for.
There were 4.
And Prince George's and Montgomery County were 2.
Prince George's, Montgomery, Baltimore City, and Charles County. So
Correct.
Last week when he made a decision about tolls and cutting back tolls, the one major project in the state that is put at risk and will probably be delayed is that Route 301 bridge that connects Northern Virginia to Charles County, one of the jurisdictions that didn't vote for him. Yesterday, in the governor's announcement about budgets, he decided to fund all of the various items that we had put aside as priorities, except for the one education funding formula, the Geographic Cost of Education Index, which is a big hit to Montgomery and Prince George's and Baltimore
Montgomery
City.
County would have received $20 million in extra money.
Prince George's would get
20 and Montgomery
17, and Baltimore City $12 million. Interestingly, yesterday he also announced that he would not be funding the operating grant for the Prince George's Hospital Center. So that's $15 million that they say they need in order to keep their doors open. You can imagine that Prince George's Hospital Center, the major hospital in Prince George's County, is an important civic institution for the county and for the entire region, and he's putting that at risk too. So over and over, you see, you know, he does like to favor those who apparently favor him.
Well, do you think that he is being punitive in this, or do you think he's making the strategic decision that if I've got to cut things, I'm going to cut where I wasn't supported? There's a difference there, right?
Well, maybe when he brought in the budget at the beginning, he felt he was trying to be fiscally responsible and trying to make decisions about the budget. He did say in February or March, if you can show me how to fund it, if you can find the money for it, I'm certainly open to doing it. We found the money, and now at the last minute, he changes his mind. He blames the teachers union for running a smear campaign
Yes,
against him.
I saw he put out a video saying that accusing the State Education Association, is that the right title?
The Maryland State Education Association.
Yes, of smear tactics.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting. It's clearly out of the Republican national playbook. Blame teachers unions. I mean, he really is following page by page the Chris Christie playbook about how to be a governor in a Democratic state. You know, what does he do? He's going after a bridge. He's making a bridge difficult that services a community that didn't vote for him. He's cutting education and blaming the teachers unions. And you know, it's unfortunate because clearly after what now 6 or 7 years with Chris Christie as governor of New Jersey, they're I think experiencing buyer's remorse in New Jersey, and certainly we wouldn't want the same situation in Maryland.
Need you to put on your headsets because we have a caller who wants to talk about education funding in Maryland. That would be Chris in Silver Spring, Maryland. Chris, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Kojo. Thanks for taking my call.
You're welcome.
Thanks for talking about what Governor Hogan has been up to. I'm a teacher in Montgomery County and also very interested in the local politics here. And we Democrats in Montgomery County were incredibly complacent during the last election cycle. And unfortunately, I think that the issue that's going to get us riled up to really organize for Governor Hogan's defeat is his decision on education. And I just think that if he had any chance of hoping to maintain some kind of positive policy outlook and reputation among people in Maryland, he's taken a big hit by choosing to make education a political issue this way.
Well, Rich, Maddalena, there are those who will say, hey, the next election is 3 years down the road. This will likely be forgotten by then. I know that in Baltimore, Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake, you mentioned that Baltimore was supposed to get $11.6 million out of this. She said that given what's happened there over the past few weeks, it really highlights the needs for educating children, and the governor seems to be walking away from that.
Well, I think, Chris, for bringing up the point, as a local blogger comment today, education is Maryland's brand. Maryland is not blessed with abundant natural resources. The Chesapeake Bay is wonderful, but it's not an economic engine for the state. What drives our state economy? The highly educated workforce. We have amongst the best, if not the best, most educated workforce in the country, in the world. That is our competitive advantage. If you take your foot off the pedal, if you do something that is going to diminish our ability to compete from a workforce standpoint, you sow the seeds for a decline in the state. And that's why you got to continue to put this money in, because those young people that we're educating across the state are going to be the entrepreneurs, the workers, the risk takers, the job creators for the next 50 years in our state. And if we lose that opportunity now, the cost in the out years, long after people have forgotten Larry Hogan, are going to be tremendous for the state of Maryland.
Are you saying that we can't cut the education budget? I mean, it's what is
additional assistance. That's where the cuts are going to.
Ever cut? I mean, we've had this issue in the city, and I've seen it across the country. Do you just never ever cut zero-based budgeting for school programs? You just keep adding money.
Well, I think the best way to look at
How do you look at that?
the education budget is how much you're funding on a pupil basis, on a per student basis, because clearly as enrollments go up or down, you really want to look at how much you're spending on a per student basis. Right. And with this action, we would actually be going down. But this action, the other governors think we would be going down on a per student basis. So we'll bring less next year than did this. And to me, that is a sign that you are actually providing fewer
dollars than this year.
Yes.
Okay.
You can also go to our website.
Enrollment is going up.
You can go to our website, kojoshow.org, and watch the live video stream of this broadcast. Governor Hogan has reduced tolls on several roads and bridges, some more heavily than others. It's my understanding that change bypassed the legislature altogether. I'd be interested in your thoughts on that.
Well, he didn't have to come to the legislature for the toll cut. Decades ago, when the Transportation Authority was created to manage the facilities, the Chesapeake Bay Bridge, the tunnels in Baltimore, now the intercounty connector that runs between Montgomery and Prince George's counties, those toll facilities all go through one entity that is supposed to function like a business and be self-sustaining. The governor chose to spring a toll decrease on everybody because he wanted the good story. I mean, this is the nice thing. Get the nice the nice photo op of him walking up to a sign with a red pen and the price of tolls of the Bay Bridge, without giving the public a chance to have a debate over. Okay, he's paying less. What's the cost for the lower tolls? Why not give the people of Charles County, the business community in Southern Maryland, the opportunity to make a case to protect that bridge, the Harry Nice Bridge that crosses the Potomac, the 301 bridge that, as I said, runs into Charles County from Northern Virginia. Why not have that debate? He stopped that entire conversation from occurring, so we don't know what the impact is going to be in the long run, because he knows the impact is going to be, this is a nice photo op, it's a good set of stories, people will pay less this summer to cross the bridge to go to the Eastern Shore. But in his second term, or when his successor is in office, they're going to have to raise tolls again. So this is about
there's a cut from $6 to $4 right across the bridge.
I
think that's
for
roughly.
bridge. I think it was this is the Potomac to have to things. In the 1950s to find money to keep these structures going. If you don't repave,
wasn't he elected in large measure on the promise of just this kind of tax relief?
Well, that's where I think he was not clear with the public, because the idea is you can get something for nothing. There is a cost. And there will be a long-term cost by not having the adequate revenues to support the Transportation Authority. And sooner or later, someone is going to have to come back and change that. Bob Ehrlich, I mean, the interesting thing about this, the ping pong ball about tolls, Bob Ehrlich decided he didn't want to raise general revenue and do a gas tax. So he decided he had to build the ICC and he had to do express toll lanes on Route 95, on I-95 north of Baltimore. From Baltimore City to White Marsh. Some of the listeners may have driven that and seen all the construction over the last few years. But he was going to do those without gas tax. He was going to do it through as toll facilities. That necessitated these big toll increases that Ehrlich put off for his second term, which turned out to be O'Malley's first term. And now Hogan ran against that, saying, you see, this is where Martin O'Malley was raising taxes and tolls off of tax. I'm going to undo it. Well, that money, those projects have to be maintained. There's going to come a day relatively shortly where he's going to have to go back on this decision.
It is a lot of money. It was a drop from $6 to $4 for vehicles crossing the bridge, but for the Easy Pass round trip, it dropped from about $5.50 to $2.50.
But you supported
big drop.
removing in this bill the monthly Easy Pass fee. How come?
I supported the decision, that decision.
Yes.
It wasn't a bill. I mean, that's why I'm trying to.
I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right, because you didn't. You supported the decision, not the bill.
Well, because Maryland was, if not the only state, one of the decided to do a monthly fee for the transponder for your car for the Easy Pass, and for the intercounty connector, it makes sense. You got to have that transponder on your car in order to use it, because there are no toll booths. So you either have the transponder or you probably don't use the road. And making it easier for people to use that new road, I think, is a good thing for the revenues of the Transportation Authority and for the commuters of Montgomery County and Prince George's County.
Here's Rick in Rockville, Maryland. Rick, your turn.
Yes, hi, Craig and Tom. Thank you for doing these shows. I wanted to ask about the automatic license plate readers. Law was passed in Maryland a few years ago. But now, since just today I saw a report about the FBI, that they themselves have major concerns about the privacy of this technology. And Maryland, I believe, it's one of the states that allowed the databases to be kept for multiple years, even if you're not under investigation. So I wanted to see if the Assembly's planning to take this issue up again. And two, it's about the example I gave was about the paraphernalia for marijuana. That was never taken care of when they passed the bill decriminalizing it. So people are still getting caught up in that. And that might be some of the frictions that we're seeing between police and civilians.
Senator Maddalena.
So I'm happy to say that on his second point, he is correct that when we did the decriminalization of marijuana last year, unfortunately, the section dealing with paraphernalia was not also altered at the same time. We did take care of that this year. I believe the governor has already signed that, so that change is going to go in place. So both actually having marijuana and the paraphernalia will be legalized.
What will happen if you're caught with marijuana or paraphernalia?
So under a small amount, you get a civil fine.
A friend is asking.
A fine, a civil. You get a fine, like
fine, like it is in the city. It's $25.
Yes, you get a fine, and it does over time. It can go up, and you could wind up in court where they're helping you get assistance, but under a de minimis amount, you wind up with just a civil fine and not a criminal record.
What about those auto?
On the issue of the tag readers, and Tom, you brought this up with the mayor in the conversation about body cameras. There is new technology that's being used in law enforcement that is stretching and testing some of the other laws about privacy, about public information, about how long this information should be kept. And I think we're going to be looking at those issues over and over in the next few years. We had a long debate about body cameras and how the body cameras would be, when they're turned on and turned off, and by whom, and who keeps the information and for how long. And we couldn't even come to that resolution during the 90 days. And so we assigned it to a broad commission that includes the police departments, the chiefs, the ACLU, the NAACP, all these different parties, to try to come together to set up a plan for how to use body cameras and how to keep the information. And the license plate readers are the same.
Well, we have
device.
in Bethesda and other places, Virginia, and it's certainly in the city. My car's parked right now out there on Connecticut Avenue, and I pay by phone. And so if the ticket writer comes by, he or she will see, looking at my tag, that I have paid the meter. The meter is flashing red. I didn't pay the meter.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a great deal of new technology there. But I guess with the FBI, I can ride around and look at license tags and say, oh, you're wanted for a criminal reason, and grab you. What's the point?
Can I tell you a very interesting use of this technology? One of our universities has equipped their security cars with a license plate reader. That the data that they acquire from driving around campus and going through the student parking lots is tied into the student registration system. So if Tom Sherwood's car has a parking permit and Tom Sherwood has classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, if the license plate reader doesn't find your car on campus on Tuesdays and Thursdays, it's going to send a note, an automatic message to your advisor saying Tom is not on campus. So that advisor can call you up and say, we've noticed your car isn't here when you're supposed to be on campus. Are you not coming to school?
And they used to just
Big brother.
And they used to just get tickets if they park in neighborhoods, because of AU, residents hate that. And if you're a student and you park in the neighborhood and they can read your tag, and if you're registered, you get a ticket.
But is that Big Brother, or is that the state of Maryland is putting in a lot of money to subsidize students to get their college education? If they're not on campus, are they costing us money? Therefore, is it right for there to be an aggressive system to hold the students accountable for being in class?
What's next? The students are going to have to punch cards when they come into class to make sure that they've been there every day?
We're all going to be tied to our cell phones. Everything is going to be in our cell phone.
The stormwater fee, otherwise known as the rain tax, was repealed, or more precisely, it's my understanding that it's now up to individual counties.
Well, the so-called rain tax, which was never a tax on rain and was never a tax.
Who started the rain tax? Was that? Don't tell me the media did that.
Some of my very creative friends on the other side of the aisle, I think, came up with the term rain tax. The whole idea
is like a death tax.
Stormwater fee.
It's a
death panels.
The number one growing source of pollution in the Chesapeake Bay is stormwater runoff, pollution from stormwater runoff. So how do we fix that? Well, that is a problem in the urban and suburban parts of the state where you have a lot of impervious surfaces where rainwater is running off. So
it was all agricultural and rural fertilizer runoff and all that other stuff.
We've done a lot of progress on agricultural runoff, but
it's urban runoff.
Urban runoff was the one big thing that we hadn't accomplished. So the idea was give the local governments a tool, a fee to come up with improvements that they would need to do to reduce stormwater runoff. Montgomery County had already been doing it, and some of the other jurisdictions wanted the increased flexibility, and it was our determination and the O'Malley administration's determination of you shouldn't force these local governments that are under federal restrictions and guidelines in order to get this done to have to take this out from their regular tax dollars, because it depends upon how much of an impervious surface you have. If you live in an apartment and you have very, very little impervious surface, why should your income tax go to pay for a shopping center that has an enormous parking lot? So this was a fair way to do it.
We need a clarification because we're running out of time. We got an email from Rebecca who writes, I seem to recall hearing that the state legislature included a fallback for the education budget, making these adjustments mandatory for future years if the governor did not fund them this year. Is that correct?
As usual, you have the best informed listeners coming in with it. It is correct. We passed a bill that does mandate that he fully fund this education formula, like all the other formulas, but that does not kick in until fiscal year 2017. So the budget that we will be debating starting next January. We can't.
Won't be retroactive.
We can't mandate it for the upcoming year, but we can do it for all subsequent fiscal years. The governor has said that he would veto that bill, but knows that it would be overridden in the democratically controlled General Assembly, so he's not He's not going to do that.
Can we have time for a quick question on
Purple line?
Pepco?
Oh.
Well,
Pepco
Exelon. People were saying that the Maryland Public Service ruled today. I'm just looking online here. Has not yet ruled. At least it's not online. You are opposed to the merger. Can you just briefly say why?
Well, because I think it does reduce the amount of service and response that I think our constituents are going to get by having Pepco as a local company. As we've seen time and time again, as these larger companies have come in and grown into larger conglomerates, the service and the attention in the local service area has decreased.
And we can blame Pepco more easily than we can some big national corporation
or international corporation.
Have you mentioned this to your county executive? He supports it.
I know, and many members of the county council. I think that the county council.
What about the Purple Line? You're not a big fan of the Purple Line, are you?
I have been a skeptic of the value of the Purple Line.
The governor, based on your description of the governor and his decision making, it sounds like he wouldn't approve it.
I can't imagine he will, only because. Well,
you think he will not let it go forward? You think he will kill it?
I don't think.
If you're following the pattern of his decision making,
I think if you're following the pattern of his decision making, clearly, he's not interested in building transit. I don't know how he goes back when he said during the campaign that he was going to build roads and that he was going to cut taxes. I don't see how he moves forward with more than $5 billion worth of transit systems that both lines service not one electoral district that is represented by a Republican in either metropolitan area.
We need to get the governor on here. Use your influence, Coach.
We're trying. We're working very hard on it. Can you hear me, Governor Hogan? We want you on the broadcast. Here's Amy in Chevy Chase before you go. Amy, your turn.
Yes. Well, when you were talking about the governor voting or funding things because of by voting rights, we have an answer to that, and that is go to your Maryland state legislature, because they have to approve the budget. And so he just can't willy-nilly say, I'm going to not fund the 4 states that didn't vote for me. Well, and your state legislature has to approve that.
You can't increase the, how is it? You can't
increase Maryland has a unique constitutional provision that is 100 years old this year that says the legislature cannot make any increases in the budget.
Right.
We can make line item reductions. The governor cannot veto the budget. Over a century, we've developed a system that has mandates, and that has what we did this year with a transfer money into something called the dedicated purpose account that said that the funds could only be used for the specific dedicated purposes we outlined in the law. And that's why the governor has agreed to all but 2, the GCI and the Prince George's Hospital Center funding.
GCI?
The Geographic Cost of Education Index. You clearly don't spend enough time in Annapolis to know these terms.
No, I hate all those. Except for FBI, I don't like any of them.
Matt Bush would have known that.
Are you going to support Martin O'Malley before you leave? Are you going to support Martin O'Malley for president?
I don't know if Martin O'Malley is running for. I don't know if he's running for president.
He's doing all the work.
Martin O'Malley was a fantastic governor, and I think Martin O'Malley would be an excellent president if he has that opportunity.
It's just because he was born in Montgomery County. That's all.
He is a native of Rockville. That's very.
Are you like all the Democrats you're supporting Hillary Clinton?
I have not made a decision in the presidency.
Will you let the senator go, please?
Yes. Richard Maddalena. No more questions.
Richard Maddalena is a Maryland state senator representing the 18th district in Montgomery County. Rich Maddalena, thank you so much for joining.
And we didn't talk about how he didn't run for Congress.
Oh, we didn't talk about that. But we'll talk about that.
He didn't run. We don't care.
We'll talk about that at a future date because we have another guest coming. She is Laura Zeilinger, Director of the District's Department of Human Services. Once again, Rich Maddalena, thank you for joining us. Since we're going to be talking about the district, what do you want to say now, Rich?
Well, I just want to say I hope the Wizards pull it out. We can, because otherwise,
I'm looking. Come on, 2016.
People are going to be coming after Tom Sherwood for ruining the season.
They'd better pull
the
it
Director of Human Services is going to be after you if you don't get up.
Yeah. Since we're talking sports, Tom Sherwood.
Yes, sports.
The mayor of the District of Columbia seems to want to have it both ways. She wants the burgundy and gold to come back and play in the District of Columbia on the one hand, And on the other hand, she thinks that the name of the team, Washington Redskins, is offensive. Will Daniel Snyder come to play in a city? Will he allow himself to be wooed by a mayor who says we really want the team back in the city, but we don't want the name?
Dan Snyder knows he's the owner of the Skins. He knows that the district government has passed the resolution, the council did, and I think Bowser in fact voted for it, that the team ought to change its name. But as mayor, she also recognizes that it's $1 billion industry. And every mayor since Tony Williams, Adrian Fenty, Mayor Gray, and now her say it would be good and under the right circumstances with put the new stadium at the RFK where the old stadium is, and it's at the end of its life. But she was told, and NBC4 reported the story, and so did Mark Seagraves for us, and I've reported it, that the team said to the mayor, look, the last mayor, Gray, wouldn't even say our name. Why should we even talk to you? We're probably going to go to Virginia.
Oh, so she's taking a step
So
forward
she
and
said,
saying the name.
just to make the conversation, and she's going to meet with Snyder now. She has now started this thing where she'll occasionally say Redskins, but she didn't always say it. She recognizes the emotional thing of this, but she also recognizes that the team could possibly be a significant business generator in that neighborhood. And I don't want to get into the whole conversation about whether stadiums generate economic development. We can do that 50 other days. But I think she's made a move because she wants to be the economic mayor of the city, and she's not going to let that just go. She's not going to be blamed like Mayor Kelly was. She let the Redskins go. She's not going to be blamed for closing her eyes to the possibility.
Well, one of her appointees is sitting right in front of us, so we can no longer ignore Laura Zeilinger. She is director of the district's Department of Human Services. She joins us in studio. If you have questions or comments for Laura Zeilinger, call us at 800-433-8850 or send email to kojo@wamu.org. You can go to our website, kojoshow.org, watch the live video stream, see what she looks like. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Kojo.
The annual count of the nation's homeless is a closely watched report. The results were released earlier this week. It's something called a point-in-time count. How does that work?
So every year, jurisdictions across the country, and it's part of the requirement of their HUD funding, do a count of people who are experiencing homelessness on that day. It's usually done in the third week in January or toward the end of January. And we use that data. It's reported up to HUD, and HUD reports on the national data, counts people who are unsheltered, who are living in emergency shelter, they're temporary housing and transitional housing situations.
It counts the people who are in DC General.
Of course, it would count people in DC General and people who are in homeless shelters. So anyone who's not in a permanent housing situation. What it doesn't count is people who are in doubled up situations, but it allows us to look year by year at trends. It's not the only data we use, of course, to measure what's happening in homelessness, but it is an important and consistent piece of data.
And what did the numbers find this year on January 28th, which was a very cold night?
It was a cold night, and we had many volunteers out with us counting that night. The mayor was out, her deputy mayor. It was one of my first days on the job, actually, at the Department of Human Services, and that we actually showed a slight decrease, 6% in the district decrease from the year before. It's a slight decrease, and certainly it's too soon to declare any sort of victory, given that DC still has an unacceptably high number of homeless residents, 7,298, according to the count.
The mayor has quite boldly said what other mayors said they would end homelessness, but she said she, in fact, will do it.
10 years, 2025.
But what does ending homelessness mean? Does that mean that a person who becomes, or family becomes, well, what does it mean?
So I'm glad
What
you
does
asked,
that
because I
mean?
think when you say it, just we're going to end homelessness, people tend to think it's sort of a pie in the sky, idealistic, aspirational goal that we'll never attain, but it's actually quite attainable. And what we mean by that, and we've sort of used in the district's new plan that our interagency council developed, rare, brief, and non-recurring. So what that means is that more and more we're preventing people from experiencing homelessness in the first place.
Let me
So that's more and more rare. And when it happens, we're able to very quickly support them in ways we don't do today to access permanent housing quickly with the kind of support so they're not falling back into homelessness.
I was talking to Sam Jeweler, who's an activist on homeless issues in town here in the Fair Budget Coalition.
Mhm.
And they were saying, can we have shelter year round? You know, the TV business and the news business, we pay attention when it gets really cold and when the 32-degree level drops in and you have to have homeless sheltering. But then for the warmer months, we pretty much in the media ignore homelessness unless somebody gets killed or something. Can you have year round into this homeless problem?
Yeah, I think we do have to have year-round access to shelter. Homelessness is not a seasonal issue. You're right. We pay attention to it more when people's lives are at risk. We actually have nationally more people who die from hyperthermia, from heat-related health conditions than we do from cold-related. So it's certainly very dangerous, and we need to be able to, for all populations, but for families in particular, be able to make sure that nobody in our community on any night with a child doesn't have a safe place to be.
Even though there was a 6% reduction, it's my understanding that a lot of that change had to do with homeless parents and children in DC shelters.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit more about that, about the challenges with any method you use for getting accurate numbers.
So that's a point in time number. So different from last hypothermia season, we saw more families entering shelter this past winter in the later months of the winter. So there was actually 1,007 families who had some shelter stay during the winter season this year, which was up from last year. Those numbers are coming back down as we've increased our rates of exit out of the family shelter system, which is why the point in time is one piece of data, but we really need to look at a number of other data points as well in order to be able to plan appropriately for the resources we need going forward and to be able to get better and better at helping people transition out of homelessness.
You've dealt with this on a national level.
Yeah.
The pathway to housing, Dr. Sam Zimbaris of New York. I mean, there's just, and I've read it in the Atlantic magazine recently this past week or so, this idea that let's stop worrying about whether somebody can get sober and clean or get a job. Put the family in housing. I understand that as a let's do it and then worry about giving them services once they're in the homes. And then that works pretty well. But where do you get the homes in this city where the prices are going through the roof? Places that used to accept Section 8 subsidized housing, the landlords say, we're not doing that anymore. We can sell $300,000, $400,000 condominiums. Where is the housing stock that you can use to get people out of shelters and into permanent housing?
So first, I'll just say that that concept that you described is called housing first. And it's not housing first and then services come later, but it's actually we connect somebody with, right, but we don't make the housing a precondition for reaching some kind of behavioral threshold, because we see that the housing is therapeutic in itself. When people are in housing, they do much better in treatment, at getting jobs, and a number of things. And we started doing that during the Fenty administration, and we had tremendous success and in market rate apartments throughout the city. So we've looked as we're transitioning out of big congregate shelters into smaller shelters in the community. Similarly, homelessness is not, it doesn't need to be a defining characteristic and follow somebody their whole life.
Is the stock available? I mean,
the stock. So we have a huge affordable housing crisis in our city. It's part of the reason why the mayor's invested $100 million in the Housing Production Trust Fund in our 16 budget, and we need to continue to make the housing stock available. In the meantime, we're bringing in subsidies to help people afford the housing that we have. We need more housing stock, but yeah, we will keep moving forward and developing the housing stock.
Between 2008 and 2010, it's my understanding, the city added more than 1,200 units for the chronically homeless under the Housing First model.
That's right.
But some say that the city has not maintained that push. Where does the district stand on creating units?
So the mayor's budget for 16 adds 250 units of permanent supportive housing for people who are chronically homeless. It's a fundamental part of the district's new strategic plan to add the number of units we will need to end chronic homelessness in the district. So I think you're right. We did a big push. We added units, and then there wasn't the same prioritization of permanent supportive housing in recent years, and then we've seen the result of that in the increase numbers in people who are chronically homeless, or the little bit slower declines in some
Here's
cases.
May in Washington, D.C. May, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
I'm a researcher on homelessness, I especially have done a lot of work and research on homeless youth in the District of Columbia between the age of 16 and 24. And they really want to go to school. They want to be enrolled. The data shows clearly they're in school every day, 76% of them. I don't need to tell you all of that. I'm sure all of you are aware. They really want to be part of the school system so that they can get out. School closures, school consolidations, school reform.
What do you really want to tell us, May?
We have 1 in 24 homeless students in the District of Columbia. And knowing that these kids desire to be in school, what is the city going to do to make it accessible for them, whether in transportation or enrollment process, or downgrade, these closures, they downgrade them.
You use the figure 124. What does that number mean? 124?
No, for every 24 students, one of them, according to OSSI, as of April 2015, there's 1 in 24 students who is homeless or in the entire school system. Now, a few years ago.
Okay, the question is.
1 in 16.
Okay.
We focus on the homeless.
What is the city doing to make sure that those children have access?
Right. Families are the issue. It used to be we would think veterans, single people out on the streets. We're talking about families, and I think that's what the caller is talking about.
Yeah, so there's, in the point in time count, we saw 2,049 children in families who are experiencing homelessness in the district. And that's the way we count in terms of what I said, families who are in shelter or who are in transitional housing programs. But when we look at homelessness in the education sphere, the way the Department of Education would look at it in OSSI would also include families who are in doubled up situations or in precariously housed. And that is really the result of an affordable housing crisis, that people don't have enough stable housing that they can afford in the community and are in some case at risk. They have that invokes in the education sphere their McKinney-Vento rights to be able to stay in their home school and be provided transportation to that school. So in every school in the District of Columbia, we have a homeless liaison whose job it is to make sure that they're connecting children and families and youth to the resources so that they can have access to the transportation, the school supplies, the school uniforms that they need. We partner with them closely to do that. And if there are cases, May, that you're seeing where that's not happening, we can we want to encourage families to reach out to their homeless liaison so they can make that link for them.
You run one of the largest agencies of the city government. Your budget, what's your annual budget with federal and local funds? $1 billion.
$425,000.
How much pass-through
$1 million.
money? How much pass-through? You handle TANF, which is basically used to be called welfare monies for families, cash, and food stamps, and which is now called
supplemental
SNAP,
nutrition.
I think it is like SNAP. It seems to me that you have such a huge bureaucracy that bureaucracy might be a problem getting things done. I tried to look through the last couple of days your agency and what the budget is and how the money is spent, and my eyes went out of focus. And how do you? And you've been in the world of homelessness for some time, trying to do that. How are you managing wrestling this huge bureaucracy so there's actual actions and not just renaming programs, which has happened a lot?
So DHS is a big place. We have almost 1,000 employees, and as you said, about $425 million budget annually. And the largest part of that really is the programs that help people who are low income, administering cash assistance through the TANF program, supplemental nutrition, childcare. And the way that I think about it is this: our job is to help district residents first and foremost get their basic needs met. If people don't have sort of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if they don't have food on the table, if they don't have a safe place to be, their ability to learn in school, to go to work, and to do the things they need to do to be able to have access to the vast amount of opportunity we have in our community is really not realistic. So we're on a social justice mission at DHS to correct that. And the way we approach it in a big bureaucracy is really multifaceted. It might be a longer conversation than we have time for today, but I'll tell you it's about setting some very clear priorities, systems for accountability, supporting staff to be able to work differently, to be more and more effective at doing it.
We only have about 2 minutes
Okay.
left.
The council voted to cut off people who have been on fund assistance, TANF assistance, hate that word, after 60 months. I think they backed off of that again, but isn't there some deadline coming up where there are thousands of families that might lose assistance?
In the current law on October 1, families who have been on TANF more than 60 months would
5 years.
would lose, and it's a lifetime limit, so not just continuously, but it collectively.
How many?
6,300. Now the mayor
6,300
6,300 families. Now the mayor has proposed to extend that for 1 year. So one of the things when I came in was I felt like we hadn't lived up to our side of the bargain in that, in supporting all of those families to be able to replace their income from TANF with income from work.
The district is one of the few jurisdictions who actually have done this extension. Lots of states have allowed it to go, right?
Right. Well, when we did welfare reform under Clinton, that's when many states followed suit with the federal government.
Got an email from Andy who said, how are youth who frequently couch surf treated in homeless numbers? Are they undercounted in local statistics?
They really are undercounted. It's a very difficult population to count. Young people oftentimes will intentionally stay hidden because they don't want to be found or counted. So we develop some youth specific techniques to get better and better at that data, and we'll do this summer a youth census that really helps us get a better handle on the youth data.
I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Laura Zeilinger is director of the district's Department of Human Services. She came on the job in January. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us.
Years of work before this.
Tom Sherwood is our resident analyst. He's a reporter at NBC4 and a columnist for the current newspapers. Tom, enjoy that weekend that you say is made for you.
All of us.
Thank you all for listening. I'm Kojo Nandi. Coming up Monday on the Kojo Nandi Show, the next wave of transit-oriented